day, as geospatial analysts, you solve some of the world's most challenging issues. The latest addition to your toolbox is ArcGIS Pro. Let's use Pro to tackle the changing landscape of the Arctic Circle. The Arctic's covered in sea ice, which most experts agree is shrinking over time. Right now, we're looking at summer ice from the late 70s. But this isn't really the right kind of projection to use in the Arctic, is it? I'm going to switch to a polar projection so that we can take a fresh look at this region, get a cohesive sense of it, and see how it's changing. Let's also orient ourselves and rotate the map dynamically so we can look north from the US. That's a little better, right? Now, this is historical sea ice, but we can compare this with summer ice from 2012, where the areas in red represent the 70s. Sea ice decline affects the world, and the Arctic specifically, in many ways: loss of habitat, shipping, energy exploitation, and competition. Let's take a look at some of this globally. ArcGIS Pro is an integrated, multi-threaded 2D, 3D application. You can work in 2D and 3D at the same time, even side by side. Pretty exciting. Now, historically, shipping happens almost everywhere except for the Arctic. The Northwest Passage through Canada allows some transit during the summer, but it's inconsistent. With Pro's fast display engine and powerful performance, you can explore data in multiple dimensions really easily. Now let's compare this to shipping activity from last year. What we're looking at here is a highly detailed map of AIS ship data from Exact Earth. It's been analyzed by partner MDA information systems to illustrate ships and movement over time. Increased shipping in the Arctic means that these new transit passages are opening up. Let's put some labels on these sea routes. Pro's modern ribbon interface gives you easy access to your familiar tools, and layer tools appear contextually so that you can easily change symbology and labeling. Increased access to the Arctic also means increased energy and economic opportunities. Here we're looking at estimated oil reserves and current extraction sites. The region is home to over 30% of the world's undiscovered oil, or at least it's estimated to be so. If we compare this with maritime boundaries, we get a sense of energy opportunities for Arctic nations. And in fact, there's competition or competing claims over the North Pole as different countries seek to expand their economic zones. And recently, it's been reported that Russia is expanding and developing bases in the region to support their economic interests. With Pro's support for military symbols, we can get a quick sense of the military presence in the region. The Arctic is clearly on the verge of incredible change. Now let's dig a little deeper. How is the sea ice actually changing? How are nations reacting? And how might the US adapt to this transforming landscape? What we're going to look at first are trends in sea ice. Now, summer ice varies from year to year, and what we're looking at is 36 years of ice cover data from NOAA's National Snow and Ice Data Center. With Pro's time slider, you can easily animate and visualize your data over time. In this case, showing us how the ice cover ebbs and flows. But what we really want to understand are the trends in this data. Is the sea ice shrinking everywhere? Or are there different patterns of change? ArcGIS Pro gives you access to an entire universe of analysis and processing. From the Analysis tab, you can get access to your favorite tools, ArcGIS extensions, or use Python and Model Builder to build your own analytics. One of the most powerful new tools is Emerging Hotspot Analysis. This tool analyzes your information as a space-time cube, organizing data into different time slices. It performs a statistical evaluation of spatial hotspots for each time period, but then also the evolution of each location over time. We're using it to analyze the presence of ice cover anywhere it occurred in almost the last 4 decades. Now, the results of emerging hotspot analysis reveal a variety of trends. Let's talk about what all these different colors mean. Now, in the case of this data, solid red is actually good. These are persistent hotspots, areas where ice cover was consistent all 36 years. Areas with a scattered fill are oscillating hotspots. Here come our results from the tool. Oscillating hotspots are areas where the ice cover varied back and forth. But what's really interesting are diminishing hotspots and intensifying cold spots. So in other words, all these tan areas used to have consistent ice cover, but now it's inconsistent. And all these areas in blue typically had less ice, and there's even less now. Emerging hotspot analysis allows us to identify that there's statistically diminishing ice cover, and it's vast and it's widespread across the Arctic. Now, when we compare the changes in the ice cover patterns to the sea routes, it also becomes clear how changing ice cover begins to open up that northern sea route and economic potential from the perspective of Russia. Russia's been expanding their military presence in many of these areas. So to better understand their activities, we partnered and collaborated with Digital Globe and All Source Analysis to examine some imagery over an airbase at the island of Kotelny. Now, to do this assessment, we had limited time and we had analysts in 3 locations: DC, California, and All Source analysts in Colorado. But once we identified the base, Digital Globe was able to share multiple scenes as image services in the cloud, so we could get to work interpreting the imagery that same day. First, we started interpreting and taking a look at the airstrip that's been on the island since the Soviet era. Pro gives you simple tools to refine the look and feel of your imagery. You can apply a dynamic range adjustment or quickly control the brightness, the contrast, and the gamma. Now, as we look closer at this beautiful pan-sharpened imagery, we can clearly see 3 helicopters and even a crowd of people on the tarmac. When you find features of interest, Pro makes it easy to collect your observations. The editing tools are organized into their own tab, and you can quickly grab the type of feature you want to create and drop it on the map. Now, in truth, all I knew was that these were helicopters, and there's clearly a lot more going on here. So I reached out to my Russian subject matter expert from All Source Analysis, Andy. I shared my initial observations as a feature service to ArcGIS Online so that Andy and I could collaborate and interpret the rest of the airstrip here. Andy was even able to do his collaboration using ArcGIS Pro in the cloud. Let's take a look at what that looks like. This is Pro running in NVIDIA's test grid virtualized environment. Pro's designed to work well in virtual machines. Here we're connecting to those same WebGIS services over the Russian base. And this virtual machine's running out of Seattle. Pro truly lets you do your work from anywhere. Thank you. So now that we understand some of the current activities on the airstrip, we wanted to know how this area had changed. By managing imagery in a mosaic dataset, Pro lets you go back in time. Right now, I'm swapping my mosaic order to bring the oldest imagery from this collection to the top. In this case, our oldest imagery over the base was from 2011. And when we swap that imagery out and bring the oldest up, we can see that just 3 years ago, this was a relatively barren, abandoned landscape. So this led us to ask what other areas on the island have been seeing rapid development. You can ask these kinds of questions using Pro's image analysis capabilities. Pro provides a library of tools called raster functions that let you process imagery on the fly. These range from things like appearance to analysis, like NDVI and classification. Right now, I'm bringing up a differencing tool that will help me run change detection. So I select my images from the past and the present, run the function, and Pro dynamically performs a comparison between them. You can also bring in your own functions and add them to the library. So here I'm using one that remaps my results into change detection colors, highlighting new infrastructure in blue. If we grab the swipe tool, we can see how this identifies some of the expansion on the island, in particular, a new road that connects an area in the eastern central part of the map up to the northwest. And taking a look at this road allowed us to identify the presence of several new sites that they've either expanded or been adding completely new to this area. Whether it's online collaboration, dynamic image management, or on-the-fly processing, Pro gives you simple and powerful tools to work with your imagery. There's our new facility. So by adding all these different bases and expanding their presence in the Arctic, Russia is responding to needing to support their economic development. But increased shipping and energy exploitation in the region also means an increased risk of accidents or environmental disasters. And so the US may want to consider placing additional Coast Guard resources in Alaska to support activities around our own coastline. To take a look at that, I'd like to bring in my colleague David Attaway. I've given David an ArcGIS Pro task to analyze where we might place Coast Guard resources. Tasks are a new capability that allow you to automate and capture workflows. David?
Thank you. Suzanne has provided me a task that will lead me through a workflow of identifying suitable areas. Tasks help automate your workflows, enabling you to share, collaborate, and also share your tradecraft. As I open the task, the first step actually has me looking at the models or the layers that are going into my data set. So with this, we are considering things like slope, land cover, distance from roads, and distance from shipping. If I go back to my task, the next step actually has me pulling in that suitability model. One thing to note is that the task automatically pulls up the project pane so I can easily browse to my suitability model. As geospatial analysts, many of us are adept at using models to analyze our geospatial data, and Pro can design and run your models to allow for you to have consistency. So the results of this actually produce what we call a suitability map, where the green are good and the red are not suitable. Moving on, I realized that this isn't enough. I need to actually refine my results. So one thing I can do is I can add information on restricted lands. So now I'm able to identify areas that are both available and suitable. The next step actually gives me the capability to start proposing those Coast Guard sites. So in this case, I can be able to drop a point here in this sheltered cove, as well as another position down here for similar reasons. So now that I have my recommended sites, I can move on to analyzing these two proposed sites, as well as one existing site in Barrow, Alaska. The final step embeds a geoprocessing tool to show the range of aircraft that may be proposed at these sites. The Coast Guard often employs the use of the Sikorsky Jayhawk. So the next step will be to model the range of the Sikorsky Jayhawk using a conservative fuel capacity of 80%. One side note is that the task actually embeds tool presets so I can be able to have this information easily. So now I have all the information I need, and I can see that with these proposed sites, we can easily respond to issues in the Bering Strait. This was just a quick example of learning and automating a workflow through using a task. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. So now that we understand a little bit about potential locations for the Coast Guard, what might one of these new stations actually look like? Pro is also a great tool for 3D geodesign. What we're looking at here is a traditional 2D facility plan near one of those potential locations in Teller, Alaska. This plan includes features like housing, offices, airplane hangars, and a runway. But with Pro, you can bring your data to life in 3D. I'm going to transform this plan into a model by using a 3D symbol. These symbols are database-driven. They connect to properties in your information to render realistic features. In this case, this symbol is set for the types of buildings that are found in northern military bases, complete with footings under the buildings to account for permafrost and ground shifting. And we could apply this same symbol to any one of those potential locations to create an instant 3D model. This is an entirely new approach to 3D authoring. Now, whether you're performing analysis or designing solutions, you need effective ways to share your work. So what I'm going to tell you next is very important. Pro allows you to share your work as layouts, as services, and now as 3D web scenes. This is a 3D visualization of David's Coast Guard suitability analysis. With Pro, you can now share your content as hosted web scenes to ArcGIS Online, bundling all your data, your information, and making it accessible to anyone who's got a web browser, no plugin required. Thank you. And going forward, you'll be able to share all kinds of 3D data to the cloud, including the types of facility plans that we were just designing, with textured buildings and procedural symbols. You'll even be able to use 3D scenes on devices. Here's that same facility design on a Windows phone, and it will also work on iOS and Android. 3D on a device is interactive and responsive. Even when we're disconnected, we can work with our local facility or get a global perspective on data and trends. Pretty impressive. ArcGIS Pro brings mapping, geoprocessing, imagery analysis, and 3D into a single application, and then it lets you share everywhere. With Pro, you're empowered to solve the geospatial challenges of our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's great. Isn't Pro awesome? I mean, I need to, like I say, I'm very excited about the whole web GIS architecture. I'm equally excited about this. I mean, you saw advanced 3D visualization inside of Pro. You saw complete image processing, multispectral analysis, deriving features inside of Pro. You saw 3D design, Geo Design there. You saw huge performance, slippy maps. You saw beautiful cartography. You saw 2D and 3D side by side. What other things? Oh, it's totally integrated with the cloud, whether that be the open cloud or online as an on-premise system. And on. I can't repeat them all, but you get the idea. This is an awesome step for us. It brings it all together. For me, that's exciting. And I'll just simply emphasize that desktop, everybody gets Pro that's a desktop user. This isn't something to buy. It's just part of the system. Yeah. Also with desktop, there's a full subscription to ArcGIS Online. That means unlimited web mapping. I can, as Suzanne showed, I right-click, I create a web scene. I right-click, I create a web map, which is a web service, which can be accessible by all of these apps. All of these apps are also included with desktop. So I've got my desktop. I'm using data that even myself, sharing even with myself, then I can take the data out in the field with these apps and use it myself. So desktop suddenly becomes both my desktop and also my way to access my information from any app. That's an interesting idea.